Hey everybody, this is Wicked from Wicked Gaming, and today we're going to show some more advanced wall construction techniques. Many people really only know some of the simpler methods like foundation stacking, but actually when you think about it, there really are a lot more methods than just that. So that is what I'm going to cover today. We're going to look at a total of 7 different methods to construct walls, how to build each method. We're going to look at the pitfalls like snapping issues and how to get around them. And finally, at the end, we're going to do a hit point and material efficiency analysis of each method so you can kind of determine which method you might want to use for different situations. Also, I'm going to use only tier 2 stone brick for this video. You can use tier 3 reinforced for each of these methods, but it just costs a lot more and thus a lot more time to construct. So anyway, so let's just jump right in. So number 1, simple walls. Most everyone knows this method. It's just a single wall piece on a foundation. Number 2, this is just a step up from the prior method. It's just 2 wall pieces, one on each side of a foundation piece. Number 3 is foundation stacking. This is what most people use to beef up the hit points for their walls. But we're going to see later in the video, this is one of the worst methods to use. However, it is a stepping stone up to 2 other methods. Number 4, walls that are made out of pillars. That's a unique look, but as we will see later, it's absolutely horrible for material efficiency. Number 5 is foundation stacking, but in this instance, you're going to line the foundations with fence foundations on both sides. Number 6 is foundation stacking, but you're lining both sides of the foundations with regular wall pieces. Finally, number 7 is fence foundation gridding with internal pillars. And as far as I know, this is the highest hit point wall and the smallest volume of space that you can actually construct in the game. So let's go ahead and cover some of the construction of these different methods. I'm not going to cover the construction of the first 3 methods as they are super trivial. Everybody pretty much should know how to do those. So we're going to jump right into method number 4, constructing walls out of pillars. So basically with this method it's pretty straightforward, as you'll see here. You just take pillars, you're going to need a lot of them, and I just scroll or strafe to the left or right and go back and forth, just getting the pillars packed in as tightly as I can. And it's better to lay out the bottom first. Just lay out the bottom rows that you want first, and then it's much easier just to go ahead and fill in the top later, because it just snaps. All the ones on top will just snap to the ones on bottom, and then you can really speed through it. So it's really the trick to this method is really just getting that first bottom layer, and you can actually do a little bit of curving with this method too. It's got a little unique look, but like I said before, it really has pretty poor efficiency, and we'll go over that in the data analysis section. Something else you'll notice here, notice how the top is not even. You don't get a flat top on this. And that's basically because with pillars, it generally follows the curvature of the terrain. So that's another downfall with this one. If you want the top of your wall to be flat, it's going to be very difficult to get it to do that. So the next method we're going to show construction of is foundation stacking with fence foundation and exterior. So starting out with this method is pretty straightforward. It's just like you would do any foundation wall where you're stacking foundation pieces, and you're going to stack as many foundations up as high as you want the wall. Once you've done that, then you start lining the exterior of those foundations with fence foundations. Now it can be a little tricky sometimes because the fence foundations sometimes want to snap perpendicular to the surface of the wall, and when that happens, you just use your mouse scroll wheel and you should be able to get it to going parallel with the surface of the wall. Another issue with this is sometimes it doesn't want to snap at all to a certain part of the wall, and what you need to do in those cases is just select some other building material like a pillar or whatever, and then go back to the fence foundation, and it usually clears it out, and you can then place the fence foundation on that section that it wasn't placing before. Fence foundations have almost the same amount of hit points as regular foundation pieces. So with this method, it's almost like having three foundations in the same volume as one foundation. It's really a very high hit point wall. And, you know, also one of the downsides to this method is that it does take more time than other methods due to the snapping being difficult sometimes. So it's just something to keep in mind, but it's fairly easy to do. There is one huge downside to stacking fence foundations like this, and it's a problem in regards to PvP because somebody can scale your wall, get up fairly high, and then drop down, and they will actually be able to stand on the wall. And it's a problem for two reasons. Number one is that they can regain stamina. Number two is if you crenulate the top of your wall and you put it so far out of reach that somebody standing on the ground cannot use orbs to hit your wall crenulation, they will be able to scale up this wall, drop down, stand on that wall, and then hit the top of the wall crenulation. So that is something else to consider with this method. Like everything else, you're getting a very high hit point wall, but it does have downsides in PvP. But you can mitigate against that, and I'll go into some of those details in another video. So the next method is foundation stacking and then lining the exterior with regular wall pieces. So this method is very similar to the last one. You just start out with regular foundation stacking, and then once you've got as many foundations high as you want, then you start lining both sides of the wall with regular wall pieces. Now, you don't really want to use the door frame or the windowed walls because the same problem we had with the actual fence foundations. You can sometimes stand on the windowsill, but with the regular wall pieces, you don't have that problem. Nobody can really climb up the wall, drop down, and be able to stand on the wall. Also, this method is much easier than the last method because you don't have the snapping issues. Generally, when you put the wall piece up there, unlike with fence foundations, it's not going to try to snap perpendicular to the wall. So you don't have to use any of the mouse scrolling to flip the piece around. It generally will just go on there or it won't. Sometimes you will get instances where the wall piece acts like it doesn't want to snap to a foundation. Again, use the old trick that I talked about at the last method. Switch to a different kind of building piece and then switch back to the wall piece. And generally it clears out whatever's going on with their coding. It clears out that area and then it should be able to snap the wall piece. Something else to consider with this method, unlike the last method with fence foundations, wall pieces do not have as many hit points as a fence foundation. It's only 35,000 hit points for a wall piece. So you're not getting as high of a hit point wall. But just like everything's a give and take, you're not getting the problem where somebody can scale your wall and stand on parts of it. So, and another thing, and we'll see this in the data analysis section, this actually has one of the best material efficiencies of all these different methods. So the last method is fence foundation gridding and filling in that grid space with pillars. This is the highest hit point wall per unit volume space in the game. You will not, as far as I know, get anything that has as high of a hit points as this method. And as you can see in the video, basically what you do is you start creating a grid work of fence foundations. You start with one fence foundation piece, place it, and then you'll place another one 90 degrees perpendicular to that to make like a cross, and then you just keep adding more and going down the line. Then the best thing to do once you've done that, you go into the intervening space, placing pillars. Now you don't want the pillars to be too high. You want the top of that pillar to be lower than the actual height of the fence foundation piece when you're doing the first bottom row. And you just go down the line, filling each one of those spaces with a pillar. Do that on both sides, and then close it off. You do that one row after another, going up as high as you want. Now, as you can tell, this method is very time intensive. It takes quite a lot of work. Now, there is one other trick to this. If you want to close off the top of the wall to where you cannot see the pillars. So now I want to place the final row and cap it off with ceiling pieces. So watch what happens here. No matter how I try, the game will not let me place the ceiling piece on top of this wall section. This is another instance of the quirkiness of this game, where you have to place pieces in a certain order to get the game to do what you want it to do. I've found no other way to do this part except for what I'm about to show you. So to cap this thing off, I first have to place the exterior foundation pieces on that wall section. Next, I place the ceiling piece. Then I place the back pillars. Next, I place the inner foundation pieces. Then I place the next two pillars. Then I close it off with a fence foundation piece, and that completes this section of the top of the wall. I have to then rinse and repeat, doing this over and over for every single wall section. Now I have tried to streamline this before, like do a bunch of fence foundation pieces on one side of the wall, and then come in and do the pillars to where I have less hotkey switching from one type of foundation piece to the next, and it always ends in disaster. I always end up having to destroy something because something stops snapping. You'll get to a point, if you do that, where certain things will not snap into place. You'll get a pillar that won't snap into place, or a wall section or fence foundation section that won't snap into place. The only way I have found to get this to work with no snapping issues is to do it in this order, one wall section at a time. That's one of the things that makes this method really a pain. It's very, very time consuming to do the top of the wall and cap it off. You can leave it off if you want to, but it does make it more aesthetically pleasing, and you can walk on the top of the wall better. So which method is actually the best? Well, it depends. It depends on what you're trying to do and what kind of design considerations, build considerations you have to think of, where you're building stuff at. Sometimes you need to put in the most hit points in the smallest volume of space to maximize that. Sometimes you don't really have to worry about space. You've got a lot of build room. So it just depends. So you'll see on this table that I have right here, I have the amount of hit points for each method. And then I also have the material costs in this table, as well as the material efficiency. And I've defined the material efficiency as just the amount of hit points you get per resource cost. In this case, hit points per brick, hit points per iron reinforcements, how many hit points you get per shaped wood. Something else I need to mention is how I'm defining hit points. So if you imagine a 1 by 1 by 1 foundation volume of space, I'm defining hit points as the amount of damage you have to do to punch through that one volume of space. I'm not defining it as the amount of hit points within that volume. It's more important to think about how much damage you have to do to that wall section to punch through it. And that's basically what you'll see here in the little diagram of how I'm defining that. It's the amount of damage needed to punch through a 1 by 1 by 1 volume of space. And so here's an example of that. For example, foundation stacking with walls on the exterior. If you think about it, to get through that wall section, you basically have three things that are comprising this wall. You have two wall pieces, one on the outside, one on the inside, and then you have the foundation that is in the inside of the wall. So the foundation is 50,000 hit points. You have two 35,000 hit point wall sections on the outside of that foundation stack, gives you a total hit points of 120,000. That's how I'm defining hit points. So let's look at a graph of the data from the previous table. Material efficiency for brick, iron reinforcements, and shaped wood are plotted on the left axis here and color-coded in blue. Hit points for each of these methods are plotted on the right axis and color-coded in orange. As you can see here, the highest hit point method per unit volume is fence foundation gridding with internal pillars. However, it has a very low material efficiency. Conversely, the lowest hit points of any of these methods is the single walls, but it has the highest material efficiency of any method. The next step up in hit points is foundation stacking, and that's what a lot of people use. But as I mentioned previously in the video, foundation stacking is not a very good method. There are a lot better methods to get more hit points and even get better material efficiency. But it's also a stepping stone for two other methods, which is foundation stacking with fence foundations on the exterior and foundation stacking with walls, regular walls on the exterior. Now, with the foundation stacked walls with fence foundations on the exterior, you get a little bit more hit points than this other method, but you're taking a hit and a lower material efficiency. But there's also something else to consider with the foundation stacked walls with the fence foundations on the exterior. Somebody can scale this wall, climb up the wall, drop down, and then stand on the wall halfway up. So I generally do not want to use this method. I'll generally go with the foundation stacked wall with the regular wall pieces lined on it. I'll take the hit and have a little bit less hit point wall just so nobody can scale my wall and stand on the wall halfway up. The next method here is pillars, and as you can see, it has more hit points than these other two methods, but absolutely horrible material efficiency. There's really no reason to use this method unless you just like the look. And so if you want the extra hit points than these other methods, it's best just to go with the fence foundation gridding plus internal pillars. So the takeaway message from all of this is just like everything else in Conan. You're trading one thing for another. If you want a high hit point wall and as small a volume of space as possible, then you're going to want to go with the fence foundation gridding and internal pillars. If you want a little bit more material efficiency and speed of building, then you're probably going to want to go with something like the foundation stacking with walls on the exterior. So that about wraps it up for this video. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe and check back more often for more Conan Exile videos. See ya.